Jane Pauley. Face the Nation is coming right up. Please join us when our trumpet sounds again next Sunday morning.
I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, crisis averted as Congress passes a short-term funding extension to keep the government open. We'll speak exclusively this Sunday morning with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. In a dramatic 11th hour scramble on Capitol Hill, lawmakers voted to extend government funding at current levels for 45 days. The bill passed with overwhelmingly bipartisan support. But did House Speaker Kevin McCarthy alienate the GOP hardliners who refused to vote for it? We'll ask him. What's missing in the bill? Any help to deal with the border crisis. And there's no aid to Ukraine, which the Biden administration says will run out before the November 17th deadline. We'll talk to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham and Trump administration Defense Secretary Mark Esper. What's included in the bill? $16 billion in disaster relief. That type of funding will help with once unthinkable scenes like the New York flooding. The state's Governor Kathy Hochul will join us. Bipartisanship saved the day, this time around on Capitol Hill. Can it happen again? We'll talk to the heads of the self-proclaimed House Problem Solvers Caucus, New Jersey Democrat Josh Gottheimer and Pennsylvania Republican Brian Fitzpatrick. Finally, a tribute to trailblazing California Senator Dianne Feinstein, who died last week at the age of 90. And the nation's longest living president celebrates his 99th. It's all just ahead on Face the Nation. Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Congress has done it once again. They've kicked the proverbial can down the road, passing a 45-day funding bill to keep the government running. Now, the deadline for getting spending bills passed is November 17th. Joining us this morning, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Good morning. You've had a heck of a week.
Yeah.
There is a lot to get to with you. I want to start, though, on the news this morning from Congressman Matt Gaetz, who says he's going to seek a motion to vacate. He's going to try to oust you as Speaker of the House.
Well, that's nothing new. He's tried to do that from the moment I ran for office. Look.
Well, this time he says he's going to keep going. May not get there before the 15th ballot, but it took 15 for Kevin McCarthy. He says he's coming for you. Can you survive?
Yes, I'll survive. You know, this is personal with Matt. Matt voted against the most conservative ability to protect our border, secure our border. He's more interested in securing TV interviews than doing something. He wanted to push us into a shutdown, even threatening his own district with all the military people there who would not be paid, only because he wants to take this motion. So be it, bring it on, let's get over with it, and let's start governing. If he's upset because he tried to push us in a shutdown, and I made sure government didn't shut down, then let's have that fight.
You need 218 votes to vacate. Has Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, said that he will?
No. He hasn't
know
said,
what?
He hasn't said anything about what he's going to do. Look,
will Democrats could cross over and follow Gates's lead on this?
Yeah, look, Gaetz is trying to work with Democrats. He's reached out to Swalwell, to AOC, and others. But if that's the way we're going to govern, I don't think America is going to be successful. Look, at the end of the day, think of everything we've been able to accomplish so far. Parents' Bill of Rights. We passed the most conservative bill to protect our border, make America energy independent. We've been able to cut $2 trillion in the debt ceiling, get work requirements back in. The hard part we have right now is the Senate has not passed one appropriation bill. Each body's supposed to pass 12. We've passed more than 70% of the discretionary spending already.
But
I thought it was appropriate.
Chance of surviving in the Senate and making it into law.
Well, you said that same thing when we stopped DC from decriminalizing everything. You said the same thing when we said we're going to stop the pandemic.
I don't think I ever talked about those things.
Well, no, you and many of the press would think, why pass it? Because the Senate won't take it up and won't sign it. Most of them in the press probably thought we would have shut down yesterday too, but no, we did not.
Were you confident we wouldn't shut down?
I was confident I could get something on the floor to make sure the option that we would not.
But
that
you
our
weren't sure
military.
It was going to pass.
Well, I wasn't sure it was going to pass. You want to know why? Because the Democrats tried to do everything they can not to let it pass. They did dilatory.
Democrats were the ones who voted for this in a larger number than Republicans to keep the continuing resolution alive.
Did you watch the floor yesterday?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
90 Republicans voted against it.
Okay, so let's walk through what actually happened. First of all, the Democrats stood up and did dilatory actions, asked to adjourn. So was that supporting to adjourn? Then they used the magic minute. They went as far as pulling the fire alarm, not to try to get the bill to come up. Look, Democrats stick together, but they did not want the bill. They did not. They were willing to let government shut down for our military not to be paid. No, I wasn't. We are going to make sure we keep it open while we finish the job we're supposed to do.
You got 45 days.
That's right.
So.
Well, technically 47, but.
Okay. Senator Cornyn said of you last night, you pulled a rabbit out of the hat a couple of times. I mean, he's acknowledging this was tough. Are we going to be staring down another shutdown?
Well, it all comes to the Senate. The Senate hasn't done one thing.
But in the House, are we going to be facing another shutdown November 17th?
No, because the House is doing their work. We've already done more than 70% of it. So compare this to the Senate. The Senate hasn't passed one bill. The Senate didn't pass anything about the shutdown. The Senate hasn't passed anything about securing the border. The Senate hasn't passed anything about $100 a barrel.
The House hasn't passed anything about the border that could actually become law.
Yes, we have. No.
Not that could become law.
That's your opinion. The House is its own body. The Senate is its own body. We're not going to surrender to the Senate. We pass what the American people want. I will tell you each and every day. And don't take my word for it. You're going to have the governor of New York on it who told people to go somewhere else. The New York City mayor literally says it's destroying a city. No, let me answer your question since you said we wouldn't.
This is making me irritated. It's making my nerves be riled up to the point that I'm getting agitated, nauseated. It's very nauseating in listening to this and watching this day after day after day, time after time after time. What has caused this infliction to fall upon to the American people is what I want to know. And it's exactly what it is. It's an affliction because whenever these people are doing what they're doing up there towards haggling and going in and out and voting this and voting that, these are all areas that they could be devoting time and energy on other areas that they're not. That's the reason why I continue to keep saying it's a diversion. It's an extraction. A distraction. It's a distraction in taking them away from their jobs towards doing what they're supposed to be doing for the American people. So in a way, it is a diversion. It's a big diversion.
What federal aid?
It's really irritating and nauseating to a lot of people to the point that it's making me nauseated. And something like this again and again and again will make you nauseated. Especially whenever it's happening to your own country, to your own great nation, to your own people.
That means legislatively. Speaker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your time today. The rainfall in New York these past few days shattered records, with the most rain ever recorded in one day in some places. Once unimaginable, these kinds of scenes are becoming more common, and the need for disaster aid more urgent. New York Governor Kathy Hochul joins us from Albany. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
You called this life-threatening rainfall event. The subways were shut, part of LaGuardia Airport shut down due to flooding. I mean, this is stunning. Do you have an assessment of the level of damage?
Well, that's exactly what we're doing right now, Margaret, is asking the local counties and the boroughs that were affected to add up the amount of money. It has to hit a certain threshold in order to be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. And that's another whole topic about how with these all too frequent 100-year storms, and indeed we had a 1,000-year storm event just a couple months ago, we need to reassess how we reimburse states and homeowners after these cataclysmic weather events. And so we're doing the assessment right now. That'll take place over the next couple of weeks. But we got through the worst. But in my position, having issued 9 weather-related emergency declarations in the 2 years I've been governor, we have to be ready for this to happen again even in another week from now. So that is the new world we're in.
Well, late last night, Congress did reauthorize the National Flood Insurance Program. That was in question for a bit. What federal aid are you expecting to need here?
Well, we need help to help build up our resiliency, help the business owners that had to shut down, help reimburse localities for the overtime and the extra resources they had to expend with emergency teams on the ground. We had 28 rescues from our Swiftwater rescue teams, and all that should be reimbursable from the federal government. So we have our list. But again, for the Republicans in Congress to even toy with the fact and hold over our heads there might not be flood insurance or disaster assistance up until the final hour, that's unconscionable. And it's tone deaf to what states like New York and many others are going through in this new
Psychological warfare. It affects people's nerves. And if it's affecting me the way that it's affecting me, and I'm not the one that's going through this type of brutality right now towards all the weather events, can you only imagine the people's nerves that have recently went through such a peril? Can you only imagine? I just imagine those people in Waverly, Tennessee, and the people in Middle Kentucky, Hazel, Kentucky, are probably saying, join the party. Join the party. Probably people down in Houston, Texas, and Louisiana that's been flooded, and Jackson, Mississippi, and other places that's been flooded this way are probably saying, join the party. These are the things that's already occurred to us. Matter of fact, just within the past 6 weeks, we had a major flooding right here in Union City, Tennessee, in Northwest Tennessee, and Obion County. About 8 or 10 inches of rain come out of nowhere. The same thing happened up towards Hickman, Kentucky. Or not Hickman, Kentucky, but Mayfield, Kentucky. We're seeing these events again and again and again, and they're not going away. They're actually intensifying. Just as what I had already told people about that was going to happen pertaining to all of this. And you know, you get tired of talking to the wind. You get tired of talking to the tree. You get tired of talking to people, and they're still taking their ears and they're putting their fingers in their eardrums, and the Bible calls them stiff-necked people. You get tired of talking to stiff-necked people, and believe it or not, I'm still talking to these people after 30 plus years. I'm still trying to help these people, and they're still rejecting the help. I explained it to my brother before he passed away this way. I said, David, you remind me of a drowning person that's drowning in a body of water, an ocean, or a lake or something. And every time I throw you a preserver out to save your life, you throw it back at me. And you scream and holler, hey, don't throw me no life preserver. I want to die. I want to die. I want to die. And then I take the life preserver and I throw it back out to you. And then you throw it back again. That's the type of response that the founder of the Windmill Ministries at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, has been receiving for the past 30 plus years. That I can validate and prove. That I can validate and prove. So as I watch my countrymen, as I watch my great nation, as I watch these people go through their sufferings, and it affects me emotionally the way that it affects me to the point
a report
to
out
the
a few
point
days
that
ago
I
saying
myself
parts of New York City are sinking from
the other day I got actually sick, I had to throw up.
and that can impact flooding risk. So if that's true, you have to rebuild a whole lot of infrastructure, and taxpayers did pump in billions to that national effort. Is there enough in the federal infrastructure plans here to do what you need to do?
Well, we're not the only vulnerable part of our country. Look at low-lying areas of Florida and other states that are just being pummeled with hurricanes. And so, no, all of our states are going to need some level of greater assistance. And for, again, Congress to even question whether they'll do the basics for us and hold us hostage, wondering if we're going to be able to get this essential relief for our homeowners and our businesses, that's just wrong. So yes, we need a full assessment of communities like New York City. One of our challenges in New York City and why the flooding is so, so devastating and floods into our subways and homes is that the New York City sewer system was built over 100 years ago with a capacity of 1 3/4 inches per hour. We shattered that record just a couple of days ago. We had double that. So the volume of water needs a place to go. So we need massive infrastructure dollars. And I thank President Biden for helping send money to states like New York to help us build up that resiliency. But it's going to be a long process. In the meantime, we're always having to prepare for the next disaster.
It's stunning that $1 trillion is not sufficient nationally. I want to ask you as well about the other crisis you've been raising alarms about, and that is the strain due to migrants. There were no border provisions in this congressional bill that just passed, and I know you've said you've had to manage without help from Washington. What would you ask Congress to get done in the next 45 days?
Well, shame on Speaker McCarthy and the Republicans in Congress, including the 9 from New York State who are complaining like crazy about the migrants, but refuse to work with President Biden and come up with a sensible border strategy. It can be done. This can be done in a bipartisan way, comprehensive immigration reform.
What specifically do you want?
Numbers of people can come in. Well, we want them to have a limit on who can come across the border. It is too open right now. People coming from all over the world are finding their way through, simply saying they need asylum, and the majority of them seem to be ending up in the streets of New York, and that is a real problem for New York City. 125,000 newly arrived individuals, and we are being taxed. Now, we are always so proud of the fact that New York has the Statue of Liberty in our harbor. We are one of the most diverse places on earth because of our welcoming nature, and it's in our DNA to welcome immigrants. But there has to be some limits in place, and Congress has to put more controls at the border, and not in this budget shutdown threat. Talk about eliminating positions for Border Patrol when we actually need to double or quadruple those numbers. So get back to work and do your jobs.
Governor, good luck. Face the Nation. We'll be back in 1 minute. Stay with us.
This is American Interest.
I've come to the conclusion that they don't know how to do their jobs. I've come to the conclusion that prior politicians are the ones that allowed for this to get out of hand to the degree of what it is right now. And I realize that, politicians, they're not in control.
South Carolina.
They're not in control of diseases. They're not in control of Mother Nature events. But at the same time, they should have been able to have seen through all of this and made proper preparednesses for all of this. And now it's as if everybody's getting caught blindsided. I don't think they're capable of fixing the problem. Whenever you get to talking about a broken system, you're not just talking about a system that is broken to the point that now you can repair it, but you're talking about a system that is unrepairable, which leads to only one other thing, which is to create a brand new system, even at the expense of adding or subtracting something from the American flag, because whenever you do that, you're changing the whole
Right.
How did you
the
solve
whole
that?
regime.
We had to keep the government open. We got 45 days to fix
You're changing the whole regime of what our American institution was founded off of to begin with.
a bill that will have 3 legs to it. Disaster funding, we need more, not less. Robust funding for Ukraine to get them through the next fighting season, not $24 billion, and a major effort to secure our border. I believe there's bipartisan support in the Senate to do both, and it will go to the House hopefully in the next 30 days.
What the speaker was talking about, though, was a bill, H.R. 2, regarding the border that Senate Democrats will never get on board.
There will
So
be
what
a
are you
compromise.
talking about?
Right. So we got to fix asylum. We need border security agent increases. We need more detention beds. I think there's Democratic support for major border security reform, but we have to attach it to Ukraine. To those who say we need to fix our border, you're right. To those who say we need to help Ukraine, you're right. To those who say we need to do the border, not Ukraine, you're wrong. The vast majority of Senate Republicans would support a combination of border security, Ukraine funding, and disaster aid.
Well, when it comes to the House
Yeah.
and the idea that we got to move swiftly, right?
Right.
the White House told Republican leadership that they don't have enough funding for Ukraine to make it through 45 days, and the authorities they have are insufficient.
Yeah. Well,
So how much time are you talking about needing?
you know, I've been around while I'm wearing a pin. Do you think I would leave Ukraine? I don't believe that one bit. This same White House says we don't need F-16s, we don't need HIMARS, we don't need tanks. I've lost confidence in their evaluation of what's going on in Ukraine. We got a bunch of allies. They can help for 6 weeks. The allies have spent more money in Ukraine than we have, and when you hear otherwise, it's just not true. It's been good burden sharing, but I'm not worried about the next 6 weeks. I'm worried about next year. We will produce in the United States Senate Ukraine funding 60 or 70 billion, not 24, to get them through next year. We will have a border security measure that is strong, and we will have additional disaster aid because the nation needs it. We're going to do those three things, and I'm hoping our House colleagues will react positively to it. I think Kevin is the right guy at the right time. The only way he loses his job is if a handful of Republicans join up with the Democratic Party to fire him. That would be a disaster for the future of the Republican Party. That's not going to happen. Kevin has the overwhelming confidence of his membership. He worked to avoid a shutdown. He will help Ukraine, but he's telling everybody in the country, including me, you better send something over for the border for me to help Ukraine, and he's right to make that demand.
Understand, but you're talking about, to be clear, a supplemental bigger than $24 billion for Ukraine, and that's going to pass
bigger.
in 45 days.
Oh, absolutely. You know why? Because we need it. We haven't lost one soldier in the Ukraine. We spent less than 5% of our military budget. 50% of the Russian army has been destroyed by the Ukrainians. They would be at Crimea already if the administration hadn't been so slow in giving weapons.
Well, and we dedicate a lot of time to Ukraine on this program, so we find it important. But I want to ask you, because Leader McConnell had gone into the lunch yesterday telling Senate leaders that he believed the White House when they said they were running out of funding for Ukraine, and then his deputies apparently urged him to drop it, which is how you ended up with this bill with nothing in it for Ukraine. Is he in control of the caucus?
Senator McConnell's been great in Ukraine, but he picked a formula to lose votes for Ukraine. To expect people like me and others to vote for Ukraine aid without border security is unreasonable. Mitch made a miscalculation. He's been great on Ukraine. I've told him 1,000 times, the key to Ukraine funding is to deal with a broken border. 107,000 Americans have died from fentanyl poisoning, from fentanyl coming across the southern border. We haven't lost one soldier in Ukraine. So America is being invaded from a broken southern border. To my Democratic colleagues, you need to take border security seriously.
Yeah. Are you saying that Ukraine should not be a standalone? It has to be.
It will not be a standalone. When I go to South Carolina, I openly talk about helping Ukraine. If you let Putin get away with this, you have a bigger war. Well, what about our border? I promise people in South Carolina, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to help secure our border and keep the fight going in Ukraine to make sure that Putin doesn't get away with this.
Have you asked Donald Trump, your friend, to come out and publicly support more aid to Ukraine and to push some of these skeptical members of the Republican conference?
I'll leave it up to him to what to do, but he wanted to get out of Afghanistan.
Well, Vladimir Putin has been praising him for his comments about Russia and Ukraine.
Here's what I'll say about President Trump. He did not pull the plug on Afghanistan, even though he wanted to. The biggest mistake we made since the war on terror is withdrawing from Afghanistan. To President Trump and anybody else, if we pull the plug on Ukraine, that's 10 times worse than Afghanistan. There goes Taiwan. To stop funding Ukraine is a death sentence for Taiwan. Putin will keep going. You missed all of World War II if you don't know how this movie ends. To the Republicans who say Ukraine doesn't matter to us, you're wrong. Respectfully, you're wrong. The war gets bigger, not smaller. There goes Taiwan. If Ukraine can beat Russia, China's less likely to invade Taiwan, and Putin gets stopped.
I need to take a break here, but we have more to talk about with you, Senator. You will. Senator Graham's going to stay with us, and we're going to talk about the legacy as well of Senator Dianne Feinstein on the other side of that break. We'll be right back.
Every bit of this could have been resolved within the first 72 hours whenever that maniac decided to invade Ukraine, whenever even our own people had bought into the lie that they were just doing this for some sort of practices. You don't spend that kind of money and time to surround a country like that with all them tanks and all them men and women and think that you're just doing that out of some sort of a practice. Within the first 72 hours after he'd done what he'd done, there should have been demands from the United States government and the United Nations towards demanding for him to stand down. If he did not stand down, there should have been demands that this is what's going to happen if you do not stand down. I realize that they put a lot of restrictions and they put boycotts on stuff and they done this and they done that, which I'm sure has affected their lives tremendously. And if anything, it only created more hate than it did towards being more sympathetic to the diplomatical global causes all over the world. But I personally think that if they would have made an example out of Putin and what did he done, within a short length of time, everybody would have went home. And Ukraine wouldn't be tore all to pieces. And you wouldn't have all them dead people laying around. And all those other people that have suffered tremendously towards opening up their doors for the Ukrainian people. You wouldn't have dams blowed up. You wouldn't have crops destroyed. You wouldn't have nuclear facilities that's been blown up or torn up pertaining to creating electricity. Whoever it was that made the decision towards taking the nuclear bombs out of Ukraine are the people that should be held responsible and accountable for what's going on right now. I don't know who it was. I don't know what presidency it was. I don't know if it was before Donald Trump or during Donald Trump, but whoever it was that made those agreements and told the Ukrainian people, we're going to take care of you, we're going to protect you, whatever you do, please disactivate these nuclear bombs and we'll deal with the rest of it. Whoever done that, whoever made that decision, and I'm sure there's a way of being able to look into it, to be able to discover, investigate who it was who done that. Those are the people to be held accountable for where we are today, because the Ukrainian people had a better edge. They had an ace in the hole pertaining to their nuclear bombs that they had over there. Whenever you take away their ace in the hole, now they're vulnerable. Especially whenever the United States government don't deal with the problem effectively and efficiently.
Ask about the power of three with those.
It's awful. Like I said, it's made me so nauseated in watching all this stuff on the news. I've actually not just got nauseated to the point of feeling like I was going to throw up. I've actually thrown up a time or two. And to believe it or not, right now I feel like I could probably go outside and do it again. Just literally throw up.
Tailspin. You can get an argument and
because it has a bearing on people's on their nerves.
Nation, including a look at the legacy of Dianne Feinstein. Former Defense Secretary Mark Esper will be with us, and we'll talk to the congressional problem solvers. Stay with us.
It's nerve-wracking. What's going on in America right now pertaining to our politics is very nerve-wracking. And it can cause stressful, emotional situations to come up in people's lives to the point of either making them sick emotionally, psychologically, or even physically. It can have a bearing on people's health.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. We turn now to the life and the legacy of California Senator Dianne Feinstein, who died late last week.
Women are seen as spear throwers of change. We're not the same thing repeating itself.
Then Senate candidate Dianne Feinstein first appeared on Face the Nation in 1992.
Ms. Feinstein, is gender a plus or a minus for you?
There's so many men back there, and we don't see anything happening.
The Californian was a pioneer, winning her seat in the Year of the Woman. The Senate went from 2 female lawmakers to 6. Feinstein said it was the first time she felt her gender wasn't a negative for voters. When she was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1969, there weren't many women in public office. Feinstein became the first female mayor of the city following the assassination of 2 of her colleagues.
Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
she never forgot that experience and championed gun laws, including the 1994 assault weapons ban when she reached the Senate.
I am quite familiar with firearms. I became mayor as a product of assassination.
I'm aware
I
of that.
found my assassinated colleague and put a finger through a bullet hole.
Though it expired 10 years later, her passionate campaign continued.
Let me talk about rights for a minute. Does a child have a right to be safe in school? Does a law client, when he goes into a law firm, have a right to believe he's safe? Does a shopper in a mall have a right to believe that she's safe? I think so.
That position put her at odds with conservatives. But she became a deal-making centrist, an increasingly rare breed in Washington, and at times challenged her own party.
This is not what Americans do.
As the first woman to head the powerful Intelligence Committee, she sparred with the CIA director and accused the agency of trying to cover up its past abuse of terror suspects.
We're supposed to be better than that we don't have to torture people.
America, she argued, is big enough to admit when it is wrong and should be confident enough to learn from its mistakes. Being a pioneer wasn't easy, as she told Bob Schieffer in 2009.
We women have had to fight for everything we've gotten in the public arena. We weren't given the right to vote. We had to fight for it.
Today, women make up a quarter of the Senate, following a path she helped to forge.
Senator Graham was one of the Republicans, as you saw there in that piece, who worked with Senator Feinstein actually quite closely in the Judiciary Committee.
Loved her. She was great. When I first got to the Senate, somebody told me, I'll protect their name here, if you want to get anything done, see if you can get Ted Kennedy and or Dianne Feinstein to help you. Because if they got on your bill or your idea, the people in the Democratic caucus would listen. If Ted was the lion, she was the lioness. She could move votes. She knew how to get to yes on controversial things. She was always kind. She was always prepared. She was a defense hawk. She was socially liberal. She was my friend. I miss her. And if you're looking for a role model in politics as a young man or woman, look to her life.
You know, there is also that image of her embracing you after that very contentious hearing. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and she was criticized from within her own party for praising how you conducted yourself. How do you think about that now?
Well, that says more about the current state of affairs than Dianne. Dianne was saying nice things. We had like a 5-second hug, and because she wanted to say something nice about me, they thought she had to be off the committee. That's what's wrong with Dianne. Wasn't the problem. She was the solution. And there are people on my side. It goes both ways. So let's just do this. Let's reflect on a well-lived life. America's better for Dianne Feinstein having served our country. California's better for it. And we lost a lot. We just didn't lose a person. We lost an idea. And I want to my contribution is to try to reinvigorate the idea. It's okay to be tough and kind. It's okay to be liberal or conservative, but it's even more okay to work for America. And that's what she did. We've lost a lot with Dianne. So the rest of us, we're going to have to up our game.
Before I let you go, I want to quickly ask you, she was also an outspoken proponent of abortion access, right?
She was.
Are you going to reintroduce your bill limiting it to 15 weeks of access, which has kind of become a litmus test for a lot of these presidential candidates?
Yeah,
Donald Trump has not signed on. He said he didn't like 15 weeks.
My bill has exceptions to rape, incest, life of the mother. 47 or 50 European nations limit abortions from 12 to 15 weeks. 15 weeks, the baby can suck its thumb and feel pain. I will introduce that bill. I want America to be like the civilized world, not China or North Korea. It's a debate worthy of a great country to have this debate, and we will have it.
Senator Graham, thank you for your time. We'll be back in a moment.
She can reach across the aisle. She was a real leader from my time on Capitol Hill, and we're going to miss her, and we need more people like her. So, again, my condolences and my salute out to her. Look, on your question with regard to what our allies see, Vladimir Putin sits in Russia today, and he looks across the landscape, and he sees the United States of America, which is unwilling to spend what it needs to on defense. It is now pulling back spending for Ukraine. We've seen successive Republican votes where more and more Republicans vote against funding for Ukraine. He sees coups in Africa. They're pushing Western militaries out. He has a pro-sympathetic sympathetic Serbia that's massing troops on the border of Kosovo. We had a vote today in Slovakia, a NATO ally in Central Europe, that just picked a prime minister who is pro-Russian and has promised to cut spending for Ukraine. Look, from his vantage point, the West is fracturing, and he's going to continue to wait out the clock and maybe hope that Donald Trump returns to the presidency.
I wanted to ask you specifically about that because in your book you write extensively about your frustration with.
How can anybody in their right minds lean towards supporting a person in Russia pertaining to the Russian government that is willing to openly kill men, women, and children, targeting schools, targeting hospitals, targeting daycare centers, targeting all the above? It's not any difference than what Saudi Arabia was doing with the Yemens towards bombing funerals and bombing weddings, not counting all the other stuff that they was bombing. What has gone wrong with the goodness of mankind to the point that they are not only willing not to do the right thing, but willing to do the wrong thing? That's the part that gets to me, and that's the part that makes me infuriated to the point that I know that I can't do nothing other than what I'm doing right now towards making these videos. But it's nauseating. This is all nauseating. And seeing wasted time, wasted energy, wasted movements, and going through this process of raising the debt ceiling again and again and again, kicking the can down the road, and having to go through it all over again and again and again. Once more, lessons will be repeated until learned. Apparently, we are so far out in left field that there's no way to repair this broken system. So because of that, there is no other choice other than to recreate a new system.
With getting then President Trump to support aid to Ukraine. And that was before the full-scale invasion. That was when Russian troops were just in the east of that country. He still, to this day, is not coming out in support of aid to Ukraine. And as we just talked about, Vladimir Putin has said some of the comments he's made make him happy. What does that mean in terms of what we should expect if there is a second Trump presidency?
Well, I suspect that he will do what he says, and that is he will come to office. He will somehow attempt to negotiate a deal between Russia and Ukraine, and that won't fly. There's only one person that can end this conflict in Ukraine, and that's Vladimir Putin, and he's not about to do that anytime soon. So I suspect Trump will quickly move to end funding for Ukraine, and then at some point he's also going to move to withdraw funding for NATO and maybe even pull out of NATO, which would be disastrous for the United States national security. So for all those reasons, that concerns me. And then, of course, we could talk about our allies and partners in Asia as well, who will equally be concerned about these type of events.
So, I mean, you're clear you're not supporting the former president's bid to return to office, but, you know, the governor of Florida, also presidential candidate, has raised his personal objections to, limitless checks as well. So do you like any of the Republican candidates right now?
Well, first, let me say there should not be any blank checks for Ukraine, right? And everything we provide should be audited and accounted for. That's just good government. But look, on the bigger question, look, I'm disappointed in some of my party who are not picking up the mantle of Ronald Reagan. I consider myself a Reagan Republican. Ronald Reagan would definitely support these young fledgling democracies, whether it's Ukraine, in Europe, which is being invaded by its larger, bigger dictatorial neighbor, or Taiwan in Asia that's being intimidated and threatened by China. That's what Ronald Reagan stands for. I think that said, I think there are a few Republicans in the debates right now who I could support, who are better certainly than Trump, and who could beat President Biden. And I think for Republicans, we got to quickly find that person, rally around them, and then bring the party together and run a strong candidate.
You want to give me a name?
Look, I think we've seen some good performances from Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, DeSantis, Tim Scott. I think there are 3 or 4 or 5, but the Republican voters need to decide who that is. It's not Donald Trump, but I think there are a number of good candidates out there.
I mean, you make clear you see President Trump as a threat to democracy, not just a flawed candidate, a threat to democracy, you've said. Upon his retirement last week, General Mark Milley, an ally of yours during your time in office, appeared to refer to him in his farewell speech as a wannabe dictator. Is that overstating things? A dictatorship?
Well, look, if you go back the week prior, Donald Trump said that Milley, for his behavior, whatever he thought that should be punished, and he talked about execution, which was completely unfair. Mark Milley served this country honorably for 40+ years in war and peace, moved, dragged his family around 20+ times. He deserves our respect and admiration, and not that type of talk. No less coming from the commander-in-chief, the former commander-in-chief. So look, I have a lot of concerns about Donald Trump. I have said that he's a threat to democracy. I think the last year, certainly the last few months of Donald Trump's presidency will look like the first few months of the next one, if that were to occur.
There are a number of stalled military promotions.
Let me ask you a question. Other people that watch us from China, Russia, wherever, and they listen to this, and they realize that we're no longer united, and we're becoming more and more divided. Do you not think that they see this as a nation that's crumbling? Do you not think that they see this as a weakness? Do you not think that they see this as a unit that is no longer functioning as a unit, that it's got too many divisions and too many contradictory squabbles going on amongst their own people? Sure they do. Sure they do. Those people ain't stupid. We got interpreters. They can watch this. Those interpreters will interpret every word that they say, and they'll be able to come up with their own ideals and their own conclusion in what is occurring, how long it's been occurring, why it's occurring, and basically the trajectory that the American government is on right now. Instead of it getting better, it's gotten worse and going to continue to get worse, because that's the pattern that they've been following under. We have adversaries today, our enemies, and we must always keep this in mind. Not just thousands of miles across the pond, but we have people right here amongst us right now that are formulating some sort of a regime of taking over the American people's government and taking over the American people. And until our top-notch leaders, either in the Pentagon or the CIA, truly understand that, we're probably one day, and this is not a prediction, and I don't want people to think that it is, but we're probably one day going to become so divided that we will be setting ducks for our enemies and adversaries, whether or not they're across the pond or they're right here amongst us. And I guarantee you this, our ancestors that helped establish this great nation, that sacrificed so much,
in line
right now are rolling around in their graves towards seeing what's happening to our great nation.
Should get the jobs that they've been nominated for?
Yeah, look, I'm concerned on a few levels. Look, first of all, I think Senator Tuberville's serious about his concerns over the policy issues. He's had a chance to bring them up for a vote and declined to do that. And I think it's unfair to hold military nominees, over 300 now, hostage, if you will, over a policy issue for which that's not their responsibility. That's a civilian responsibility. And so my view is that that should not happen. It's happened in the past by both parties. And I've called on recently Senator Schumer to start moving nominations, which he has, because otherwise it looks like both parties are politicizing the military. That's my institutional concern. And then, Margaret, if you step back, you ask yourself, look, The Chinese government doesn't shut down. The Chinese government doesn't do continuing resolutions, and they certainly don't hold up their admirals and generals when they need them as they prepare for potential conflict with the United States. We just look really dysfunctional, and we're harming our own readiness in the process.
There you go.
When we look across the international environment.
Mark Esper, thank you for your analysis today. We'll be right back.
How much worse can you get than that? That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
From KFES 12.
That was a mouthful, wasn't it? You know, in certain ways, I think a certain amount of people in America thinks that they're invincible. I really think that they think that we can't be taken down, or that our government can't cease to exist. I really think
Pennsylvania Republican Brian Fitzpatrick and New Jersey Democrat Josh Gottheimer
that actually believe that our great nation is invincible. Rome thought the same thing. Remember that.
In the course of this program, which was Speaker McCarthy coming out and seeming to link some movement on the border to his willingness to move a Ukraine funding bill. Then you heard Lindsey Graham say how that would go down, or he wants it to go down in the Senate. He called it a three-legged stool. Would you get on board with what Graham proposed?
I would. I think we have a lot of challenges. I think we need to address all of them. It's actually consistent with the problem-solver framework that we introduced last week. It addressed keeping our government open. It addressed Ukraine. It addressed our border and expiring authorities. We dealt with several of them in the continuing resolution that passed, thankfully, yesterday. But there are remaining items that are unaddressed, the border and Ukraine being two of them.
But the border proposal that has passed, that HR 2 that Speaker McCarthy talked about, would not go anywhere in the Democratic Senate.
That's not going anywhere. I mean, but I think to Brian's point, we have to address both, and I think it's a false choice to say we're going to do one or the other.
Right.
Clearly, we know that we can make it the next 45 days to support Ukraine, make sure we stand up to Putin and to China and Iran, which is critical to our national security and to our allies. But also, we need to make sure that we deal with and deal with the challenges at the border and border security and live up to our values there. Right.
What Graham laid out, though, was not just funding for Ukraine. It was, I mean, almost a year's worth of funding for Ukraine. Can you get that done in 45 days?
Well, I think we can't. We know that we can get through the next 45 days, but it's a matter of days and weeks and not months and years in terms of what we have available to make sure that Ukraine has what they need to stand up to Putin in the dictatorial march. So I think we have to make sure that we get some legislation to the floor quickly. I know the speaker is open to that. He signaled that he's open to that. I think that's key. And but we have other challenges, and we can do more than one thing at once.
And I do think the Ukraine funding should be for a longer period of time. It should be for a year. It sends the right message to Ukraine, sends the right message to Russia. And it's perhaps, I think, the best solution inside our chamber to get that done. And the border security language, just so you know, in our framework was a bipartisan bill. It was Kirsten Sinema and Tom Tillis's bill in the Senate, myself, Jared Golden in the House. It's a two-party solution of the border. It represents the intersection of where the two parties agree.
And you think you can get the speaker on board to consider?
I'm going to work hard. Yep.
You also heard today the call, a motion to vacate, to oust Speaker McCarthy from leadership. He says he can survive. Can he?
Yes. To me, what's going to be put on the floor is a choice. Are we going to reward bipartisan bills being put on the floor, or are we going to punish them? That is a choice. Substitute out Kevin McCarthy's name for Hakeem Jeffries or anyone else. Mm-hmm. If the situation were reversed and the squad tried to do the same to Hakeem Jeffries, should he be speaker at some point, I can tell you what I would do on the first and 100th vote. I would vote to table it. Because I don't think that sends the right message. I think what we need to do is encourage bipartisanship, encourage two-party solutions to be brought to the floor. Mm-hmm. That's what we need. And to do the opposite would really be rewarding this Hatfield versus McCoy brand of politics that's destroying our nation.
Gates says he's going to keep coming, and he can, right? Only one vote needed for a motion to vacate.
And that may require a change in the rules package. I mean, this cannot be the trajectory for the remainder of the Congress.
To stop one person from
correct. I mean, that was, so keep in mind.
That was how Speaker McCarthy got to the leadership. That was one of the promises
that was one of the changes that was made, but we were given assurances that was never going to be used. That was a matter of principle that it remained at one. So you can't have it both ways. And 90% plus of the American public does not want us to be voting on a motion to vacate every day for the rest of the term.
Is he going to get
Sounds
Democrats?
like Brian was up there. He came there. I don't know.
But are Democrats going to join Gates? He needs to get 218 votes.
The way I look at this, you've got a civil war raging in the Republican caucus, and as it has been since the beginning, right? With extremists trying to take out common sense, and they keep doing it time and again. And so I'll leave that to Brian. That's their caucus, and I'm from Jersey. We don't mess with other people's families, and so I'll leave it to them. But I'll tell you what, we're very open to from a policy front. We continue to do this, as you saw yesterday, as you saw the debt ceiling. But if there's bipartisan ideas brought to the table, we're always going to be at that table negotiating in good faith. That's what the Problem Solvers Caucus does. It's how we got yesterday done, right? If you remember, that's how yesterday happened. You had every Democrat plus one help cover for the 91 Republicans they lost. We all came together for the good of the country to stop a government shutdown and make sure we help people and help families. That's the kind of stuff we should be sitting at a table about negotiating in good faith, and we'll continue to do that.
Republicans have shown they can't govern on their own. Fair?
I've seen the only way these things are getting done is with Democrats, right? And so, in bipartisan governing, and that's good for the country. People want us to put the country over party.
So can you say we won't be back in the same place November 17th talking about a possible government shutdown?
Well, we're 2 out of 435, so we're not in a position to make that prediction. What we can say, like we said last Sunday on a show that Josh and I appeared together, we will do whatever it takes to keep the government open. We made that pledge. We were prepared to take drastic action yesterday. Had that not passed the floor.
What do you mean?
We will do, well, there are a number of mechanisms where we could force a floor vote on our two-party solution.
Okay.
There are options for us to do it. We were prepared to do it. Thankfully, that's one of many. Thankfully, we didn't have to go there, but we will do what it takes to make sure the lights are on in the United States government, for sure.
And I think the point is we're going to work around the clock these next 45 days. But this cycle of insanity has to stop. And this is what Brian and I believe, right? We need long-term solutions. We can't keep doing this and wasting our time. We have real challenges in the country.
And this includes the debt ceiling as well. We cannot be constantly on the 11th hour of bricksmanship.
That's why we were behind that deal.
It's not even the debt ceiling. The FAA wanted to be authorized.
100%.
You haven't passed into law a defense bill.
Yep,
These are the most
But
basic
the extremists,
things.
you saw how we got here. These ultra-right-wing extremists keep fighting against reasonableness and common sense. They refused to vote for the defense bill, right? Multiple times they kept trying to take it down.
Yep.
And that's the point. That's why you need bipartisan solutions right now in this Congress. It's the only way we're going to be able to govern.
The extremists are the problem in this country. It's the bipartisan moderates that are the solution. That's what we believe in.
We're going to stop right there. Like I said a while ago, this is all nauseating to me. And the people that I talk to out in the real world, they basically tell you the exact same thing that I tell you. They become nauseated with this because it's just been a whirlwind of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to the degree that there's really no hope in sight. And it's depressing. It's very, very depressing in what the American people are having to deal with right now, especially due to the fact that all of this could have been avoided if the right decisions was made going back 30, 40 plus years ago, that consequently has put us where we are today in seeing all these disruptions in our government affairs. I just want to say something in regards towards looking at the past and understanding what unified our great nation years and years ago, even though it may have been unified for the wrong purposes, for the wrong reasons. But let's go back into the era whenever my great-grandfather was basically a predominant figure in this area. He was a community organizer. He was a pharmacist. He sold products to the public. His wife worked as a midwife. They were still getting around on horse and buggy, per se, in this area, because this is Northwest Tennessee, even though the T model and some of the other automobiles had already been manufactured up in New York and places up in Michigan or whatever. It takes a while for all that stuff to trickle down, because you got to look at the facts that they didn't have internet back then. They didn't have the communications like we do today. And basically they were still living in the early 1900s, the same as they was living in the late 1800s here in this area. They was predominantly using strong arm law tactics in being able to maintain law and order in this particular area. And rather not it be right or wrong in their reasoning and behind using those type of strong arm tactics, they was still maintaining law and order. As of yesterday, I explained to my neighbor, one of my neighbors that stopped by here, and I explained to him how that the people basically turned against my great-grandfather and basically punished him for him doing exactly what he was called upon at the time of doing, which wasn't just being a community organizer, but also working for the state. One time they was bringing in a load of goods, and I guess the wagon was so loaded, or maybe the bridge was rickety to the point that the bridge gave in. The whole team of horses and everything on the wagon fell into the river, Obion River, coming in between Union City and Kenton, Tennessee. And the only thing that saved the team of horses, because they were still attached to the harnesses below the river, is that my great-grandfather had to put like a Jim Bowie knife in his teeth and jump down into the water and go down probably 15 or 20 foot, however deep the river was, and cut the harnesses towards being able to save his team. After World War I, is basically shortly after, whenever things got really, really hairy over here in America and throughout the world pertaining to the Spanish flu and then the 1929 Depression. Whenever the 19 Depression hit, there was people around in this area that was losing farm after farm after farm because they couldn't pay their taxes. A matter of fact, it was so bad in northwest Tennessee and throughout other areas that basically my grandfather and grandmother had to leave this area, go up to Chicago, and work for about 8 years before they saved up enough money to come back to Tennessee and buy up a farm. Times was hard. There wasn't no money. Things wasn't moving in the South. It had basically come to a halt. In the meantime, my great-grandfather that had the merchant store over here, he was holding everybody and their brother up in offering them credit because he knew that people had to eat, people had to survive. Well, in the meantime, it was so much going on bad at that time that it drug him down to the point of declaring bankruptcy. My great-grandfather, as far as I'm concerned, was a decent man. He was decent enough that there towards the last, they took on the responsibility of a child that needed to be raised, because I don't know what happened to the parents. But anyways, he adopted this child whenever they was already in their 50s. I realize, and I'm sure if he was living to this day, he'd probably tell you the same thing, that maybe their motives pertaining to why that they was being so strict in hanging people at that time, black and white, didn't matter. But if you got caught doing something you wasn't supposed to be doing, you paid the consequences for. I pretty much feel assured that he would tell you, and people like him would tell you to this day, that if our laws here in America does not redesign itself towards being stricter in punishing people that are getting out here committing crimes, the decent people don't have a chance. They don't have a chance in not only not staying in control, but they don't have a chance in keeping what they got, because eventually the wolf is going to be coming to the door, just like the wolf come to my door in attacks, being hunted, being tormented, being terrorized on a day-to-day level for 3 consecutive years, while the courts up here in Weakley County sat idly by and allowed it to happen. That basically costed the death of my younger sibling, David Jeffrey Jackson. And it's really sad to see how that our nation has been basically held hostage over drugs and over our own leadership pertaining to corrupt attorneys and corrupt judges, people that are so biased that they only going to support certain things and certain people, and people that has become so liberal that they let people get away with stuff that would have been unimaginable for people to have gotten away with back whenever my great-grandfather was playing a part in law and order around here in this area. People wouldn't even have thought of an individual getting away with something the way that they do today towards attacking an older person or molesting a young child or doing some of the things that they do today. People have lost respect. And as I was speaking to a contractor this morning, because my other contractor that I had, it was supposed to come up here, didn't show. It was a no-show Saturday. He wasn't coming up here, so I talked to another contractor, and he said, well, people's lost respect for each other. I said, well, first of all, you got to have respect for yourself before you're going to ever even come close to having any respect for anybody else. And I said, you can act like that you have respect for other people all day long. But once more, if you don't respect your own body, if you don't respect your own words, if you don't respect your own self in your own dignity and in your own identity, you can kick the can down the road all you want, but the bottom line is this: you still ain't come up with a solution, or you still haven't changed your aspect of how that you're dealing with yourself. And because you haven't, the odds of you truly respecting another person is really a joke. It's a joke. And the way that the insurance companies come in here and basically push themselves around towards knocking on people's doors, wanting you to take out Liberty Life or this or that, or Yamaha Insurance, or coming around doing all these other things. It was the conglomerates, it was the millionaires, it was the big people that come into our country that contaminated our way of life. Not just our Southern heritage way of life, but our way of life that has put us where we are today, towards us basically being at one another's throats. And until we're willing to open up our eyes and realize this, and once more, I do not validate whatsoever in what that they was still pursuing in the early 1900s towards still attacking the black people, even up until basically the Civil Rights Movement. I don't agree with that. I'll never agree with that. I don't think it was wrong. I know it was wrong. I know it was wrong. And I think a lot of people that have been prejudiced all their lives have maybe grown out of that to the point that now they can realize that it was wrong. Even though they may still have their buddy system that they hang around in people that really are biased and really are prejudiced in this aspect. But the bottom line is this: if we as a nation are not strong enough and smart enough to stick together and conform, and whenever I talk about the gun laws needing conform, I'm just not talking about the gun laws. I'm talking about lots of laws. I'm talking about stuff that begins at the courtrooms, that people have sat idly by and let judges get away with, judges and attorneys get away with for years and years and years, that has put us where we are today. That has put us where we are today. I'm just going to use a couple judges right up here in Dresden, Tennessee, for an example. They talk about how that they care about their public. They talk about how that's the reason why that they ever got in their positions, in their jobs, towards wanting to make decisions, fair decisions, towards being a judge, judging people about their wrongs and their rights, towards being fair-minded for the benefit and the will of the people. Right? That's the excuse that they use. They use this as an umbrella, but that's the reason why that they decided to get into the positions that they're in. Why, for the past 30 plus years, actually 40, ever since it's been discussed in Northwest Tennessee, I know thousands of times whenever I was just a teenager growing up, much less what has gone on since then. How come they still benefit on executing their laws towards punishing people that wants to have a marijuana joint? I'm not talking about somebody with a bale or two of marijuana. I'm talking about people that uses marijuana for medical purposes to be able to soothe their aches and pains and their bursitis and arthritis. How come they still haven't legalized that in the state of Tennessee? Tell you why. Because it was their cash cow. They was doing it for cash purposes. Now they'll tell you, oh no, we was doing it for health purposes. Well, if that be the case, you're demented in your excuse towards health purposes, towards the benefit of the people, because from a medical perspective, they have proven thousands of times that medical marijuana is a benefit in certain cases pertaining to certain people. How come they hadn't legalized that? Because of money. It was their cash cow. But yet now these same judges, these same attorneys will go to church on Sunday and act holier than thou. What's happened to their consciousness? I'm going to tell you what's happened to it. Just like the Bible talks about, that in the last days their minds will be seared with a hot iron. Now, I don't know what that hot iron was that it was talking about in the Bible. Matter of fact, it may be multiple things that it was talking about. Odds are it probably was, regardless whether it was a hot iron coming metaphorically in the form of hardcore drugs, or a hot iron just with people being hateful, or a hot iron towards people being ignorant, or a hot iron towards people being greedy, or a hot iron towards people making themselves look one way, but knowing that they're completely, totally different. Their minds have been seared with a hot iron. Why has their minds been seared with a hot iron? Is because they do not want to retract any type of grief, any type of guilt. That's the reason why that they don't like me, because people like me are looked upon as being troublemakers. That's the same thing that they looked at Jesus Christ back 2,000 years ago. They didn't look at him towards him being a liberator. They didn't look at him towards him being a Moses. A matter of fact, that was the main things that they was arguing about Christ about, is because in lots of ways Christ was contradicting some of the old Mosaic laws that they thought. In actuality, it wasn't that Jesus was changing the Mosaic laws, the Mosaic laws. It was Jesus was conforming them. He was modifying them. He was tweaking them. He was getting it down to the brass tacks of, hey, it's not only against the law, God's law, in committing adultery, towards sleeping around with this one and that one and that one and this one and this one and that one, but it's also just as much of a lawbreaker in the fact that if you got it in your heart towards lust, in lusting after all these different people for sexual desires, you're already committed adultery, is what Jesus was saying. In other words, Jesus was getting to the root of the problem, and that's one of the areas that I myself have to work on a day-to-day level towards the weaknesses of the flesh. Especially whenever you don't have a wife. Especially whenever you don't have a companion. Has it been tough? Heck yeah, it's been tough. Have I had to go through a conforming, reforming mentality, physically and mentally? Heck yeah, I have. Matter of fact, my hot water got cut off at about the age of 45 to 50 in 2005, whenever my wife decided to walk out of my life, simply because I had stood back up for the Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Since then, I have not held, touched, slept, or made love to another female. And I for darn sure ain't gonna make love to another male. But since then, I've had to reconform my way of life. Once more, has it been tough? yes, it's been tough. But I've made up my mind that if I'd done already been bamboozled by my first wife, if I'd done already been bamboozled by my second wife, that marriage only lasted about a year and a half, 2 years, because of discipline actions and her not willing to discipline her own personal son, while her son basically done whatever he wanted to do. And if I stepped in, I was going to play hell for it. So that marriage didn't last very long. And then my third and fourth wife, which was the same wife, basically not only used me, not only played me, but also costed me about $500,000 or more. That's on a conservative level. Why would I want to infect myself even further towards jumping in the saddle with another contaminated female? And I'm not saying that all females are contaminated over here in America, pertaining to them being spoiled and pertaining to them taking advantage of the male species. But it's not just the females. It's the attorneys. It's the judges. It's the system. Because by and large, if a female gets in behind, gets on a court stand and she goes to whimpering and crying, or if she's the right female, it don't matter. How many good men have been ruined over a bad female? You probably, if you've done an analysis on it here in America, you would probably find the differences in the range of about 70 to 30. 70% of the women come out on top. 70% of the women come out on top, while 30% of the men got absolutely screwed over that never should have got screwed over. Why is that? Why is our system so unfair like that? Because it has been embarked up into our DNA, and we have fell for this entrapment that has befallen upon to the American people. I couldn't tell you the amount of businesses or farms that have been taken away because of some female that was spoilt, and because some little something wasn't going just exactly right in her marriage. The next thing you know, bingo, she owns the farm. Bingo, she owns a business. Bingo, she just ruined that man's life. I'm not saying that it's all the female's fault, because there's a lot of bad men out there. But if you was to do an equation here in America, you would find, I think it would probably be somewhere around 70 to 30, and I may be conservative with those numbers. It may be more like 80% of the women come out on top over the men because of the way the system is designed, indicating that the system isn't damaged, but it's broken, which verifies the things that I'm talking about going back into the early 1900s, before the 1929 Depression, of how things was being handled, and all of a sudden everybody and their brother told my great-grandfather, oh, no, that's politically incorrect. We're no longer going to do things that way. And of course, with him being at his age, him and his wife, they basically sat back and said, well, let's just see how this is going to go. And probably millions of others said the same thing, that was told, oh, no, this is improper. We're no longer going to handle these law enforcement issues this way. Well, now, since 100 years later, going back to 1929, Spanish flu, World War I, basically puts us at 100 years later. Look at how corrupted and how broken that our American institutions has become. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a teacher, a preacher, or a politician to look at the differences towards how people handled their affairs and was in control then versus now.
And it was kind of like whenever I was growing up as a young child, I knew that my father was abusive, and I knew that 2 or 3 other lives around here, 2 or 3 other families around here, basically those men was basically stern with their families the same way. And it wasn't until my bus driver decided to pull over on the side of the road and come back and knock the shit out of me, hit me in my jaw, and basically dislodged my jaw to the point that I walked around with my jaw popping for about 3 months. It wasn't until then that I fully understood, well, you know what? This is a gang thing. This is a group thing. This isn't just 1 or 2 people that's performing in this way. This whole area right here is like this, especially whenever a bus driver can pull over on the side of the road and knock the shit out of a 10-year-old or 11, 12-year-old kid and get away with it. And it put fear into my life so badly at that point in time. If any of the people around here that remember me back growing up, knowing that I wasn't a hanky-pankier towards getting out here and messing around with this and messing around with that and doing this and doing that, that's why. That's why. That's exactly why. The fear of God got driven off into me of not just the abusiveness that was coming from my dad, but the abusiveness that was coming from the community. And now, at the age of 62, I can look back and say, okay, they was just as stern and as hardcore towards being to the far right as what our country has done today in going to the far left and being too lenient. In other words, there's no happy medium. The Americans go from one extreme to another, kind of like our weather today. You wonder how come our weather is responding the way that our weather is responding? Well, maybe the weather is responding just exactly how the Homo sapiens on the planet are responding. Whenever you can no longer have a normalcy about how that we handle our affairs, regardless whether it's porn being now taught to our children, or it's okay if a man decides to want to be a woman or a woman decides to be a man. It's okay. Matter of fact, our government supports homosexuality and lesbianism. It's okay to be different in this aspect, knowing good and well that our ancestors taught us otherwise, knowing good and well that the Bible teaches us otherwise. Whenever you have a country that can no longer stabilize itself towards being where it should be, then you have a country that is no longer considered orderly. And I guarantee you right now, people like Putin over in Russia and other oligarchs throughout the world, other communist-controlled countries around the world, are probably laughing at us right now because we've basically made a mockery out of the things that our ancestors tried to create that our past generation has now destroyed. Pertaining to good, sound, balanced people. They have seen us go from one extreme to another. And because of it, in their minds, they're saying instability. Instability, in their minds, produces weaknesses. In other words, they're probably thinking that if we was to invade America the same way that Pearl Harbor got invaded, but they do this on a massive scale, it wouldn't take the American people but just a little bit to surrender and give up their arms and become submissive to a brand new, different regime. That's probably what they're thinking. Even though the NRA and people like the NRA that supports the NRA has probably brought a great deal of, yes, stability to America, because they know that just about everybody and their brother in America is armed to their teeth. Eventually, proof will be in the pudding, to the degree that our enemies, our adversaries, will say, well, it really don't matter whether or not they're armed to their teeth or not. If we cut off their internet, if we cut off their electricity, if we cut off if we put barriers up on the roads to the point that they got to go through these check-in sites, if we start throwing people in jails by taking over their system, taking over their government system, taking over their state and their local systems pertaining to their courthouses and their jails, it's just a matter of time before the American people will basically bow and surrender. That's probably what our enemies, our adversaries are thinking. I'm not saying that for sure that that's what they're thinking, but it's a good possibility because they're seeing all this instability in our government. They're seeing how that at one time America used to be strong and stern against homosexuality, and now we've gone the opposite direction in one extreme to another. They see where America used to teach a pledge of allegiance in their classrooms and used to have prayer in their classrooms. Well, now they see where we've taken that out. They see us as a instability, unstable people. And when you do this, now you are putting forth images or signals that will be interpreted in certain ways. And you got to look at it logically, that our adversaries, our enemies, which is out to steal, kill, and destroy, are just waiting and laying wait so that they can come in and take the American flag, red, white, and blue, with them stars on it and them stripes on it, dismantle it, take it down, and then raise their own flag pertaining to their own regime and their own laws in their own way. That is how close that we are in losing control of this thing. And whether or not people agree or disagree with the things that I've just talked about, that will be up to them. But I feel like that I got a right in voicing my opinion, because I got just as much skin in the game as anybody else does. If anything, I've probably got a little bit more skin in the game, because I know for a fact that our ancestors come over here way before this great nation was ever America. We had people that was coming over the boats over here, immigrating over here from England. And of course, throughout the years, we mixed and mingled with the Native American people. And that's one reason why that I have a great deal of empathy and sympathy pertaining to the Native American Indian people in America and throughout the world, is because they was here first. They was here first. And you know, there may have been from time to time clashes. There may have been from time to time skirmishes pertaining to one Indian tribe versus another Indian tribe, but it wasn't until the white man decided to invade the grounds of America that basically caused the bloodshed to go beyond anything imaginable or fathomable here in the great United States of America. I want to thank you for listening. I want to say our prayers for all the victims, regardless whether it's flooding, regardless whether it's diseases, regardless of whatever problems that people are going through right now. We just want to say a sincere prayer for those people. We want to pray. Yes, we do welcome legal immigrants to our great nation, but we do not welcome illegal immigrants to this nation, especially if they are coming over here for the wrong principles and for the wrong desires. I want to say, please pray for our elderly, our sick, the abused, the used. Pray for our leadership. Pray for our great nation. And please, please pray for our military troops that have sacrificed so much and continue to sacrifice so much for our liberties and our freedoms. God bless America, God bless our troops, and heaven help us all, and shalom.